On August 26, 1910, a child was born who would truly alter the world with love. In church services, she loved the missionary stories. By age 12, she accepted Jesus as her Savior. She prayed for a while, and God wanted her to be a missionary at age 18. She joined the Sisters of Loreto, a missionary group, and never saw her family again. She was loved by many people because of her selfless life and compassion for others. She was also aware of others' pain and suffering. God compelled her by His love by making her preach the gospel to others. Now I have a flashlight here, and I'm going to shine it in my eyes. Now the reason I did this is because Saul of Tarsus had something similar happen to him. Now Saul was a Jew, and he knew the Old Testament scriptures inside out, backwards and forwards. One day the Jews got envious because there's too many Christians in the land. To explain this, the Jews started persecuting Christians and throwing them into jail. Saul felt the need to go to Damascus to arrest more Christians. On his journey to Damascus, Saul was temporarily blinded by a great light, much like I was temporarily blinded by this flashlight. This brings me to my first point in my sermon, conversion. The definition of conversion, as found in Webster's dictionary, is to change in character or form. While blinded, Saul was approached by Jesus, and in Acts 9:4, Jesus says, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" Jesus told him that a man named Ananias in Damascus would heal him. Ananias then went to Saul, and in Acts 9:18, we see what happened to Saul. Immediately, something like scales fell from Saul's eyes, and he could see again. Saul later became a Christian, and Jesus changed his name to Paul, and God used him as a missionary. This is kind of similar to the story of the woman that I shared with you earlier. Now this brings me to my second point, call. One of the definitions of called is to summon or invite to come. Jesus called Paul to be a missionary. In Acts 9:15, Jesus says, "Go. This man is my chosen instrument to carry my name before the Gentiles and their kings and before the people of Israel." On his first missionary journey, Paul and Barnabas went to Cyprus, and in Acts 13:5, we see what they did on that journey. When they arrived in Salamis, they started preaching to the Jewish synagogues. Their missionary journey was a success. Later, Paul grew stronger in his faith and love of the Lord, and Paul's calling was very similar to the story of the woman that I told you about earlier. For my last point, compel. Webster defines compelled as to drive together or unite by force. In 2 Corinthians 5:14-15, we are told how Paul describes Jesus' love. Either way, Christ's love controls us. Since we believe that Christ died for all, we also believe that we have all died to our old life. He died for everyone so that those who receive His new life will no longer live for themselves. Instead, they will live for Christ, who died and was raised for them. And in Acts 9:20, we are told what Paul did as a missionary. At once, he began to preach in the synagogues that Jesus is the Son of God. These two scriptures shows us that Paul grew stronger in his faith with Jesus and was compelled by Jesus' love. Now back to my modern-day example. The woman that I told you about won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1979 because of her work to overcome poverty and distress. She also started the homes for the orphans and the homeless. One day she was looking for a home until her arms and legs ached. Now she knew how the homeless felt. I'm sure that many of you knew who this woman was. Originally known as Agnes Bohatsanu, the world came to know her as Mother Teresa. Both Paul's story and Mother Teresa's story are both similar because both were converted to a Christian, called to the ministry, and were both compelled by Jesus' love. The main point of this sermon is no matter who you are, God can compel you by His love. You too can be converted so that He can call you and then compel you to do His work. So let me ask you, can you apply this message to your lives?